September 21st, 2014, from Bank of America Stadium in Charlotte, North Carolina. It was the Pittsburgh Steelers going into Carolina to face the Panthers in prime time on Sunday Night Football. Carolina won the toss and they elected to defer. The Steelers took over. They would end up punting on their first drive, and the Carolina Panthers had the ball for about 10.5 minutes. They started on their own 20 and they marched down to the Pittsburgh 22, but their drive stalled and they would end up settling for a field goal as Gano kicked the 40-yarder to put the game's first points on the scoreboard as the Panthers led at this point 3-0. So now the Steelers would take over, but they would end up punting, and then Carolina ended up going 3 and out, and they punted the ball back to the Steelers. So now the Steelers had the ball with a little over 2.5 minutes left in the first, and they started on their own 25. Pass interference on first down would end up leading Pittsburgh into Carolina territory, and moments later they would end up kicking a 42-yard field goal as they tied this game up at 3 apiece as Shaun Suisham's kick was good. Carolina then took over and brought the first quarter to a close, and they started the second, and the 3 plays later they would punt the ball as the Pittsburgh Steelers would get the ball on their own 7-yard line with about 13.5 minutes left before halftime. They marched all the way down to the Carolina 3-yard line, but then Le'Veon Bell was dropped for a 3-yard loss, and Roethlisberger's incomplete pass led to 4th and 6 from the 6, and Shaun Suisham would come in to kick his second field goal of the game, this time from 24 yards out, to give the Steelers the lead at 6-3. So the Panthers now took over with about 5.5 left in the first half, but they would end up punting the ball back to Pittsburgh, and Pittsburgh had the ball now with less than 2 minutes on the clock, about a minute and a half, and they would get all the way down to the Carolina 27, where on the last play of the half, Shaun Suisham kicked a 45-yard field goal to make the score 9-3 as the Steelers went into halftime up by 6 points. Carolina would start off the third quarter, but then on 3rd and 15, Cam Newton was sacked for an 8-yard loss and he fumbled. It was recovered by Worlds, and Pittsburgh took over on the Carolina 17. They ended up going for a field goal, but a penalty would end up making it to where they ended up going for a touchdown as they got a first down on 4th down, and so they got a 7-yard touchdown, Ben Roethlisberger to Antonio Brown, and they now led 16-3. So the penalty hurt Carolina as the Panthers could have just let up 3 points there, but instead ended up letting up 7. So now the Panthers got the ball with about 11 minutes left in the third quarter as they were trailing by 13 and needed 2 touchdowns to tie this game. They would end up having to settle for a field goal on this drive as their drive stalled on the Pittsburgh 22, and Gano came in to kick his second field goal of the game, this one from 40 yards out, and it was now 16-6 as the Panthers trailed by 10. The Steelers now took over with about 6 minutes, a little under 6.5 left in the third, and they would march all the way downfield 80 yards in 6 plays in about 4 minutes. They got to the Carolina 7-yard line, and Ben Roethlisberger threw a touchdown to Antonio Brown for the second time in this game, and now it was 23-6 as the Steelers were in full control of this game on Sunday night in front of a nationwide audience. The Panthers now took over and brought the third quarter to a close, and they opened up the fourth around midfield on their own 46, but then 3 plays later, Cam Newton found Greg Olsen for a 37-yard touchdown that brought them within 10 points at 23-13. The Steelers now had the ball with about 13.5 minutes left in this game. They would end up having to kick the ball, but then a fumble on the punt would end up leading to a touchdown, and it was now 30-13. So mishaps on special teams as the Pittsburgh Steelers went to punt it, but then the kick was fumbled, and Robert Golden ended up he ended up laying on it. It was a fight in the end zone. So everybody was going for it, and the Steelers were called with possession, and the referee raised his arms up to the sky for the touchdown signal. So it was 13-3 Steelers at this point as the Carolina Panthers had the ball with 11 minutes left as they now trail by 17 points. They would end up punting on their drive, and the Steelers took over with 10 minutes left, and they made short work of the field as they went 98 yards in 4.5 minutes, capped off by an 8-yard touchdown run by LeGarrette Blount, as it was now 37-13 as the Steelers just kept pouring it on and running up the scores. The Panthers could not stop the run. even though they had them backed up on their own 2. They let up a 98-yard drive. So now the Panthers took over with over 5.5 minutes left in the game with the score 37-13. They ended up going 80 yards in 6 plays in a little under 2 minutes to make it 37-19. But with there only being 4 minutes left on the clock, the Steelers were able to run the rest of the game clock up, and they took a knee on the final play as Gradkowski had come in. And so now the final score was 37-19 as the Steelers win this one as they upset the Panthers in Carolina. And in this game, Big Ben Roethlisberger was 22 for 30 with 196 passing yards and 2 touchdowns. He also rushed for 1 yard off of 1 carry. Le'Veon Bell at 147 rushing yards off of 21 carries, and LeGarrette won at 118 yards off of just 10 carries, one of which was for the touchdown. Cam Newton was 24 for 35 with 250 passing yards and 1 touchdown. He also had 7 rushing yards off of 2 carries. They actually brought Derek Anderson into the game once it had gotten so out of hand, and he was actually 5 for 6 for 80 yards and a touchdown late in the game once it really didn't even matter anyway. Kelvin Benjamin caught a touchdown. He had 115 yards and 8 receptions, and Greg Olsen had 5 receptions for 69 yards as well as a touchdown, and Antonio Brown had 10 receptions for 90 yards. Kuechly had 14 tackles in this game, but the defense wasn't able to stop the Steelers as they were scoring at what seemed at will, as they just were running up the score and running the ball, as they racked up 264 total rushing yards as opposed to only 42 rushing yards for Carolina. So the Pittsburgh Steelers went on Sunday night with the final score 37-19.